Hi, this is Shira Rubinoff with Insights in Tech. I'm here with Tom Kellermann, SVP of Cyber Strategy, Contrast Security, and Trent Teyema, President, CSG Strategies. Pleasure to be with you both here today.
Great to be here.
So today we're going to understand and discuss the differences between privacy versus security versus identity. Is it one or the other, or a spectrum of both? Privacy is the right to control how your information is viewed and used, while security is protection against threats or danger. Identity is who the individual is. In the digital world, security generally refers to the unauthorized access of data, often involving protection against hackers or cyber criminals. Organizations today are scrambling to create a strong cyber postures, both proactive and reactive. So Trent, when dealing with organizations, how do you advise them on tightening up their privacy, security, and identity? How do they all come together?
Well, so a company needs to think of it as a triad, because you need all three. Because you can't do security if you don't have identity. So you need to know who's on your network in order to identify them, and then you can secure, who is supposed to be there and who's not. And so usually on the continuum, you have privacy and security. And a lot of people think it has to be the absolutes of one or the other. And it's actually, if you find that sweet spot in the middle, security and privacy start backing each other up. And if you add identity on top of that, then you're really able to lock it down. So a CISO, system administrator, you can't lock down a system. You can't have zero trust unless you really know who's on your system. So it all comes down to identity. So identity is that basis. And then you can really protect privacy, people's information, sensitivity of the documents in the company, and that's where you can overlay security. I mean, it's that combination where you need to work it all together.
That's a great explanation. And Tom, you've led cybersecurity strategy for many organizations and certainly have dealt with all three of the combos and how Trent really broke it down for us. In your perspective, where do you think that an organization should really throw its, weight behind when dealing with security for an organization, coupled in with identity and privacy?
Well, again, I'm half Swiss, so I don't think you can have privacy in the absence of security. That being said, there's this construct of zero trust that everyone talks about. But that being said, the challenge with zero trust is it should be verify then trust, and you should be verifying in real time. And the authentication, there should be authorization, but more importantly, you should really implement a strategy of least privilege, because this is why the insider and / digital insider threats become so significant. I would venture to say that there are more digital insider phenomenon than insider phenomenon occurring in the world today, because accounts are being hijacked, accounts that had the authentication, the authorization, and the access to the system. And so if you want to be truly proactive, you need to baseline what normal is and what abnormal is. And so you need to understand behavioral anomalies associated with the entity being the interaction between the human and the code. And once you can understand what abnormal behavior looks like, I think you do a much better job of suppressing security and privacy threats.
Well, that's interesting. They talk a lot about insider threat, and that's really focused on, as you mentioned, and digital insider threat could be even more of a problem. So Trent, how would you say an organization needs to almost combat that insider threat, whether it coming from a human leading to the digital? Because most companies are now really focused on the human aspect sitting there and becoming either the negligent insider or the uninformed insider, really not focusing much on the digital threats.
So the insider threat is a top concern that you're trying to combat against, that you really need to monitor from. The insider, the digital insider, so somebody coming in from the outside and posing, getting that identity, creating the account, that's the difficult thing. And I think the more a company sets itself up to have more privacy and less identity of who's on their network, that causes the problem. So the more accounts you have there, so as a business model, if your business model is you're serving up and you have many, many accounts on your network and you're not really sure who they are and you're not able to protect against them, that provides a excellent launch place to launch attacks or operate from. Now, if it's an employee on the inside, hopefully you know who all your employees are. But a lot of people, when they go through it, and on the digital insider, you don't constantly audit who's actually on your company, who's a valid users. So many times where somebody left the company, either they were terminated or they left on their own terms, HR never told security that they're no longer there. And so it's like, it could be a quarter later when you're doing a routine audit and there's no activity on this account. So you're trying to hunt it down. So really paying attention to who's on your network, who's a valid user is critical. And you need to keep up to date with who has access to your system, who's a valid user.
And I'd like to add a couple of things here. What I see in the financial sector, and a lot of my work is there, is there's a lack of dialogue, true dialogue occurring between the surveillance/compliance teams and the cybersecurity teams. And the surveillance and compliance teams are looking for traditional insiders, but not understanding this whole behavioral anomaly phenomenon that could be occurring on the laptop associated with, let's say, the person that's running market strategy, right? In addition to that, threat hunting doesn't necessarily touch the C-levels laptops or their assistants, because it's taboo, which is ridiculous, because the most prolific cyber criminal groups are whaling. They're going after the C-levels executives to pollute those machines. And to that point, I think we need to be much more conscious that there's one game in town that's very effective, and it was pioneered by Turla. Turla is a Russian espionage group years ago, and it's called reverse business email compromise. And it's a form of island hopping where they basically take over administrative rights to the O365 environment of the corporation. And from there, they launch targeted emails with fileless malware against the board of directors and the other C-levels from true administrative right and accounts that exist within the organization. And if you're not conducting, let's say, threat hunting on your O365 environment to understand, well, wait, we've got 3 administrators instead of 1, or the administrator is doing some strange things over here, you'll never pick that up.
I think you just highlighted the importance of having a cybersecurity specialist on boards, and somebody that is able to talk to those points, and not just somebody who knows something about cybersecurity but is not a super expert on it and can talk at the level of the C-suite and the board in order to make sure that they're cyber secure and their cyber posture is as good, if not better, than the rest of the organization. So that is something I think organizations need to take note of.
That's a very good point. Actually, with the administration just released their new cyber policy they had for this year. And within it, just to sum it up, is the way they're approaching infrastructures and classifying infrastructures to include, like, one of the views can be interpreted as technology is now an infrastructure, which is really significant because the impact is that there are now rules that are in place that a company has to follow. And so that's why having somebody that you can rely on that can advise, the C-suite, the board, on what this means, the nuancing, because the Critical Infrastructure Reporting Act requires all infrastructures as designated by the United States government to report an intrusion and incident, capital I, within 24 hours. Now, before the bill was passed, you may or may not have been considered or consider yourself as an infrastructure. After the bill is passed and how the current administration views infrastructures, you now may be governed by that law and may not even realize it. So what you said is so important, because you really need to have that ongoing dialogue with people that monitor the policy, the laws, and the security and the risk to advise both the suite and the board, kind of give them the context. It's also very important for the CISO. The CISO needs somebody they're able to talk to and share information, because day to day they're blocking and tackling. And it's nice to be able to turn and pivot and have these conversations to expand their threat view, the lens of what the risk actually is and how to mitigate it for their organization.
I think that's very well said. And, a lot of the organizations are saying, well, budget cuts, we can just get the CISO up to snuff and make sure that they just know enough. But as you both have articulated well, that it is not enough, and more needs to happen on the board level and certainly in the C-suite level. So thank you both very much for your comments and your shares for our audience. And I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thank you.